Welcome to another episode of the Hot Topic Podcast with your host, Patrick Quanch.
Got Michael Hottinger from Reading Truck Equipment on the Hot Topic Podcast. And man, I'm so happy to have you here, brother. You're looking good, my friend.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. This should be fun. I'll tell you, this is my first podcast, so I'm excited about it. But I think it's super cool. I mean, I've listened to enough, so great way to get out and connect with people. Obviously, as your new venture's rolling, so just happy to be part of it, my man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And yeah, we've been talking about this for some time now. Gosh, I was looking back on it. You and I have been doing business for 15 years, from your days at Leasing Associates and Dealers Truck Equipment. I know we'll get into all that later, but we started talking about something that we needed to connect really the country together years ago. And I know when I brought this idea to you, gosh, I don't know, last year sometime, like you and others, man, they were like, this is something that needs to be done, especially in our space. So I'm looking forward to this.
Well, I think it's fun. I mean, I think this is a great way to connect with people, like you said. And, we both know a lot of people within the industry, but this is just a different way to get out there and learn a little bit about it. And I think I know what your vision is of trying just to get a broad group of people and, some subject matter experts, some people that are just kind of connected to the industry, and how do we keep it thriving and growing as all of our partnerships, just continue to grow.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, I think it's super beneficial. I've had a lot of great response to the thought and the ideas of it. I just think there's a lot of great people in our industry that have never really had a voice at a mass scale. We do the traditional, trade shows, Work Truck Week, things like that, and it's all good. But as well as I do, you spend 90% of Work Truck Week with the people that that you're intimate with, right? And that only leaves just a small portion of your time out there to connect with new people. And it's difficult. It really is, because everybody just kind of blends in, because we all pretty much do the same thing. So I think having this platform gives people like yourself, and, I know you saw the one we did with Stephen Farr earlier, just the opportunity to be able to talk to more people and maybe connect with someone that you wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's great to be able to, this is going to be out there, right? So unlike a phone call or, like you said, a trade show, it's out there. Someone can look at it or listen to it at their leisure. And that to me is something that I think is kind of appealing, because now you're not trying to find that one window of time to connect with someone and hear what's going on, and just really see what this kind of person, what does this person have? What, how do they connect into the industry? I think is kind of neat as well.
Yeah. Yeah, man. You've had a long history in this industry too, man. Tell me a little bit about that. Where'd you get started? How'd you get into it? Right. So just like everybody else, was it an accident? Right. So yeah, man.
Well, I'll tell you, it started in college. I just happened to get an internship at GE Capital Fleet, which was up in Minnesota in 1992. I was able to get an internship with, I connected with one of the recruiters, and I had no idea, what this business was about. It was just like, okay, I'm going to go work at GE, and not knowing anything really more about it. And they put me through their internship program and sort of modeled it as their management program. So I was pretty fortunate. Every year I would go to a different department. But yeah, in 1992, I started this thing just by random luck. And I remember the guy's name. His name is Ken Dobson, the HR guy. And we were talking about it. And, as a college person, you're supposed to put a resume together and stuff like that. And, the only real experience I had, true experience that you would put in there. And I put, I was cutting grass, and I was like, I'm a lawn maintenance engineer. And he was like, what is that? And so I guess we just sort of connected because of, the title, and I came with a little bit something different. And, just been in the business. I mean, I tried to escape a couple times, and then I get pulled back in, right? I just get pulled back in. So, I guess it's probably something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life, but it's a great industry. I mean, I would not have come back if it wasn't something great and there weren't great people in there. Then, like I said, I had a chance to get out and do some other stuff with PepsiCo or Frito-Lay and a couple other businesses, but there's something kids kind of just keeps drawing me back to this industry to a certain standpoint. So, yeah, lots of experiences at leasing companies and dealerships. And so I've kind of touched all of the real parts of the commercial vehicle business space.
Yeah, especially being with the Reading. I mean, you're in the manufacturing space as well. So yeah, you're right. Soup to nuts. You've kind of done it all.
Yeah, I mean, Reading. Reading came to me with an opportunity, and I thought it was a great company. I talked to some people that I trust, obviously in the industry. You being one of them, and what's Reading like? What's the feedback on the street? And it's part of a bigger organization, but there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of opportunity within it, as well as there's some challenges, as every business is. So I've worked from the biggest of big to the smallest of small, having owned my own business, and each of them are unique in their own and how they operate.
Yeah, you go from the small companies. You can tend to you can steer a smaller boat a lot easier than you can a big ship. So decisions get made quicker, ideas come together a little faster. Big corporations, it just takes longer. You just got
I
more
think there's
people.
right. Well, there's a lot of people, but there's a lot of there's a lot of people looking at it from a different aspect. From a smaller company, you usually have one or two people that are making decisions, and and it's good and bad. Like I said, I've been part of both of them, and there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
Hopefully, when you make the decision, it works out, and if not, you just need to say what didn't go on and pivot and move on to the next one.
Yeah, for sure. What I know you've had a couple of stops along the way. Which one stands out the most to you? Where'd you
From a commercial vehicle perspective, or
yeah,
just work in general?
just work in general.
I mean, Reading's been great. I've been here less than a year, so it's been really eye opening to work for a large company that manufactures as well as installs the vehicles. So just learning their systems. Dealer's Truck was great. I think we had a good group of people there. It's a great organization. But that was okay. We need to do this, and how do we do it? And a couple people made some decisions, so that was fun. I mean, I will say, working for Mercedes-Benz, that was probably best um, my best job, because when Mercedes did things, it was like, oh no, we're not just going to do this. We're going to do this. Everything is over the top. And, the expectation is because you're Mercedes-Benz, but, I've learned from each of them. I mean, then, there's things that you should, pull from every one of your experiences. And I think I have, and, I've learned a ton from each of them. And every time I've, went to a new opportunity, you just take what you learn, you take those experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we all do the same thing, right? So we all have really great people that we work with or work for, that continued to be in our lives, no matter where we're at, what stop we're at, what we're doing. I think great people just help great people, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. I know you have a huge network of people that have helped you along the way. I have kind of the same thing, have a big network, and it's always great to have some really good people. So
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
important.
I think, related to your question of what experience has been the best, when I was at GE Capital, I was fortunate to have a boss. His name is Michael Hottinger, we still talk to this day. We talk about 4 or 5 times a year. He's still a mentor of mine, great guy. He's out in California running a heavy duty parts company, but he's one of those. At a very young age, he gave me a ton of experience and allowed me to sort of grow. And he kept some guardrails on me, but he was the reason why I moved to Texas. So I had no intentions of leaving Minnesota, and he moved to Texas, and 6 of us moved down here, and he's the reason I'm in Texas. So and he's been a true friend, a true mentor to mine, and I just appreciate it. And I have a couple people in my life that are like that. We have a big network, and people say, "Well, I know a lot of people." You and I obviously have some connections, and you use a lot of those. And then there's a kind of a smaller group that really know you very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
And they know how you work. But the nice thing about my relationship with Michael is, again, he's known me for 30 years. I mean, he's kind of been through as I evolved as a person. And, I've asked him about jobs even, should I take this job? Is this, do you think it's a good fit? And when we were buying our company, I asked him about buying it, and he was like, yeah, that's a great idea. You have a kind of you have a, you're a sales personality, but you have a very good general management background, and that will lend itself well as you are running your own small business. But relationships like that, I think, are super valuable. And I don't know if a lot of those exist today. I mean, they do, don't get me wrong, but our lives are so transactional. Our lives are so much that, connecting with people and helping them grow, it just takes it takes a special connection, and it also takes a special person. And, younger people have to be open to that, accepting that feedback. And that's just, I think it's given the world we're in, it's so fast and transactional. I think it's hard for people to kind of sit there and say, okay, what's this person bringing to me? They're not going to guide you. They're going to, they're going to help you. There's another guy that the internship program that I was part of. The gentleman's name is Melvin Collins. And he said, listen, I'm a passenger. You're driving this vehicle. I'm the passenger. I'll help you when you get to decisions, but these are all your own decisions. And, again, still part of my life. I don't talk to him as much, but, that was one of the things that I remember him is, that kind of that mentor mentee relationship was, you have to tell me where and you think you want to go, and I'll help you kind of navigate that. But, someone has to be open and not just say, this is just a job. If you want to do more, it's never just a job.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've all had that person in our life, right? That they're trying to teach us, and I don't want to say we're reluctant to it, but we're certainly hesitant because we're not understanding what they're asking us, right? It's like, well, kind of like in your instance, well, you're the one driving this, and your first thought was, what do you mean I'm driving this? What do you mean by that? I don't even know where to go. I'm hoping, and we have people like that, and those relationships, those mentors that we have throughout our career, man, they're so meaningful because I don't think they're not sought out as much as they just kind of assume the role, right? And it's just one of those things where they can see something within us that we can't see for ourselves, and they're just there. It's like you made a great analogy, the guardrails, right? They're just kind of the guardrails for us. They keep us out of harm's way. And even though business will evolve and business will change, and there's always new parts of business, the very structure of doing business with other people is still existent. It's building relationships and being transparent and being trustworthy and all these superlatives that we can throw at it, but it's still very true in today's world, for sure.
Absolutely. And like I said, I've been pretty fortunate to have a few of those. And then I'm now, when I was at GE Capital, I was an intern, and then I was running a group of interns, and some of those interns I'm still friends with, and they call me. So, again, 25 years later, I have relationships with some people, that we still have some connections with. It's unique, but it's also fun. And then they're in, none of them are in the vehicle business. They're all over the place, and one to medical sales and recruiting and, all this kind of stuff. But just to see how they've grown from, when I knew them as someone who had no idea what they wanted to do with their life, and to where they are now, it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, much like your professional life, growing up in Minnesota, then moving to Texas, is like two ends of the spectrum when it comes to the weather. What was it like growing up in Minnesota, dude?
It was, yeah. I mean, here's what I'll say. I mean, Minnesota's a great place, right? So land of 10,000 lakes. And when you grow up there, you don't really know anything different. And again, in the 90s and before that, the world was small. The world was very, very small. So the awareness that you had, or the ability to have awareness, was not there. I mean, you didn't have something at your fingertips that said, "Oh, hey, look at here's what's going on in Miami, or here's what's going on down in Florida." Like, that didn't exist, right? And so it was kind of small, but it's a great place to live. You have all four seasons, but I'll just tell you, it's cold. I mean, it is cold. Never say never. I'm gonna say never, but you would be hard pressed to get me to move back there, because it is cold. I mean, about 5 years ago, it was winter time, and I got in my dad's truck, and the thermometer said -22, and that was before windshield. I was like, this just confirms I am not moving back north. It's just, again, never say never. I would obviously do it if I really needed to, but I'm just accustomed now to. I mean, I consider myself a Texan, right? I mean, got boots on, wear shorts most of the time, and enjoy it. But Minnesota, it's surprising how many great companies are up in Minnesota. So again, it's a great place to live. You got Best Buy, you have 3M, you have Cargill, you can keep going down the line, Ecolab, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of big companies that are based in Minnesota, and it's a different way of living. And now if you call someone up on a Friday up there, most of them are gone. They're gone at a cabin. They're 4-day work weeks because they're trying to enjoy that small sliver of time that it's warm enough to be out on the lakes. But again, I never thought I would. Again, when I was younger, I never thought I would leave Minnesota, because that's where my nucleus was. And then Michael Bader was like, "Hey, I want you to move down here." And he was running a flooring company. I'm like, I don't know anything about flooring in general. Like, I'm working for a finance company, and again, he just kind of knew me and knew that it would be a challenge, but we also had a ton of fun, and we did. 6 of us came down and we had a great time. So that just kind of tells you kind of his, the way he operates, to get 6 guys, like, really, that were mostly from Minnesota, and had them all move down to Dallas to help him kind of work on this flooring business. And no one really, I mean, everybody was in the financial business. So, we were all kind of in the same boat, but we all came down, made it work, and had a ton of fun. It was a good time. It was a kind of one of those, you kind of have your learning moments, but this was one that kind of was like this. It was a steep learning moment from a personal growth perspective. Just, okay, I'm not along I'm here now around my family, and just kind of learning how to do all that stuff was a kind of a personal good growth milestone. That's probably the better word to say for me.
Yeah. Wow. This Michael guy you keep referring to, he must have been, he must have just been a hell of a leader, because he took himself and 6 guys from Minnesota that didn't know anything about the flooring business, convinced y'all to move across the country into let me ask you this. What time of the year did you move down here? It wasn't August, was it? Was it a decent
No. It was like October. It was like
okay.
October.
So at least he had the wherewithal to get you guys down here, and the weather wasn't an issue. October is a glorious time to be here in North Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. But yeah, I always tell people that aren't from Texas, just a side note, and they're like, "Man, what's it like living in Texas?" And I always tell them, "I tell you what, man, go to San Antonio, get on the Riverwalk in the middle of August. You'll love it." And instantly they don't ever want to come back, because it's like 140 degrees below the surface, and you can't get any air down there, and it's just it's pure misery. But that's how I tell people, if they want to move to Texas, that's what they need to go experience. That if they can deal with that, they can deal with anything.
Yeah. Well, look at what happened yesterday. Look at those storms that were out in West Texas.
Yeah.
That was crazy. I mean, I sent a couple of pictures to, sent them back up to some people in Minnesota. They were like, wow, that tornado was massive. I mean, I don't know if you saw any stills of that thing, but, again, people underestimate the size of Texas. And again, that was, now more and more people are, because you're aware of technology and stuff like that. But again, back in the 90s was still, there were no real, I think there were cell phones. Yeah, there were cell phones maybe, but how would you find out about something? You had to go there to experience it. So,
yeah.
Like I said, it's hot a couple months out of the year, but back to your question about Minnesota, it's cold for a lot more months out of the year up there. So let me just tell you that. I mean, I enjoy it, right? The snow's great, and it's fun to go up there and do that. But then after a while, you're like, okay, I'm tired of putting on layers upon layers upon layers.
Yeah.
Which is why heated seats are so important up there.
Yeah. Very true. That's funny.
Remote start and heated seats, man.
You got to have them both. Gosh, it's had to have been in the mid 90s, late 90s, I guess. I'd spent a little time working for the Thermo King Group, so transport refrigeration.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, they're based out of Minneapolis. So, I go up there for a week and do some training. It was wonderful. It was in October. Weather wasn't bad at all. I mean, it was glorious up there. And, but just to your point, even people from other parts of the country, like you said, there wasn't this instantaneous knowing what another region of the country was like. So everything that we based our opinions on was typically what we saw on TV or what we saw in the news or whatever, right? I can't tell you how many people seriously ask me, "Hey, do you own a horse?" "What? You live in Texas, right?" "Yeah, but not everybody in Texas owns a horse." But that was their perception. It's like, well, everybody in Texas has a horse. "No, I don't have a horse, man. I ain't keeping up with that thing. I'm out." Yeah, I'm not. No, but and then even earlier, of course, my mother's a Filipino, so when I went to the Philippines, this had to have been 1980, I guess. It was even right. We were even further removed from the world, right? I get over there, and keep in mind that a large portion of the Philippines back then, even though there was industry and it was industrialized, there were still some third world parts of the island, right? And I got there and was introduced to family and everything. Well, everything that they knew about Texas was the TV show Dallas. So, right? Everybody thought we had ranches and everybody was a cowboy and we were all in the oil business. And it's like, no, I just live a regular life, man. I just happen to live in Texas doing it. But it was just, but to your point, yeah, it's just crazy how in today's world, if you want to know something about any part of the world, you just instantaneously, like you said, look it up on your phone. Search it up.
Let me give you a different example.
Yeah.
So my nephew, I think that he moved to Austin a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So he was he had a couple jobs after college, and then he moved down to Austin, and he was like the first couple months he was like, what was I thinking? I should it's the bumper sticker, right? Like, I'm not from here, but I got here as fast as I could. But he's like, I'm not leaving Texas. He's there. I'm trying to actually recruit more of my family to come down here, but but he's like, no, I'm not doing that. And he the cold and whatever else and stuff like that. But he's like, the moving part is just kind of part of the world. But now, again, in the 90s, I really had no idea of like how big the world is, but how to just get and do some of those things. But I'm grateful for it. I have a lot of great friends down here. I've got a great group of friends down here, guys I play golf with, and those types of things. So you make your life by where you live, and I don't foresee myself going anywhere anytime soon. But again, never say never. But it's
right.
And here's the other thing, Pat. When you think about it, even today, someone's like a kid, someone like where are you going to move, right? I'm going to move to Chicago, New York, Miami. No one ever is like, I'm going to move to Dallas. Like Dallas is not on the list of, hey, I'm going to go move there. Now, Austin is, just because it's got a lot of pub with Tesla and a lot of the things there, and the tech and the younger crowd or whatever.
McConaughey, yeah,
McConaughey, exactly, McConaughey. Which everybody thinks is he your neighbor? Like, do you see him when you're in Austin? Like, no.
Austin's huge, bro.
Yeah. Huge. So, but that just gives you the example of George, my nephew, moving down here, is like, it's just different, and sometimes different is good, sometimes different is bad, where people just can't do it, and and I get it, but it's been great.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Plus, it's great to play golf all year round. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'd like to live in Florida, man. It's just, you're talking about golf year round. That's where the Mecca is down there. So
yeah, but it's still, I mean, again, given where I'm not just going to pick up and move. Obviously I'm not a super serious golfer, but you can go out and the golf courses are still open. You can put a jacket on or whatever, but it's not up north where you're not playing anything. You're putting in some winter sports up there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we look at hockey guys come from up north, the golf guys come from down south. So it's just the way that it is.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
Although, you got the cup now, Florida's in it back to back. So don't go saying too much about it.
Isn't that surprising? It's, a Florida team, and they've been good for a lot of, I'm not a huge hockey fan, but it seems like their names are popping up more than you would think a Florida team should be participating in the Stanley Cup Finals. It's crazy how, and that whole region down there just loves hockey. It's crazy.
Oh, but you also have a lot of people that have moved there. So,
yeah,
you have people that are passionate about hockey. I never played hockey. I've only been on skates a couple of times in my life. I played basketball, but you have people like move down here and move to Florida, and they want their sports, and so they're passionate about it. And having a team down there that they can root for is great. So,
yeah.
But it is bizarre that 2 years in a row that team's in it, and like whatever the Vegas team won the Stanley Cup a couple of years ago, and that's why Canada's pulling so hard for the Edmonton to get a cup back up in the Canadian land. So it is interesting to say the least. But and the other part though, you see this, and it's hockey down here, even for young kids. I mean, it's a growing sport.
Huge.
I go to the airport and I see all these kids in there with all their hockey gear, and I'm like, "Where are you guys going?" I'm like, "Well, we're going up north to play hockey against a bunch of people up there." And so again, that just shows you how from 20 years ago, I would have never thought to go play hockey or go play basketball down in Texas, and now it's like no big deal for them to go jump on a plane and go play hockey up north.
Yeah, isn't that a big business though? The sports industry of, when you and I were growing up, well, at least down here, we had 3 major sports. We played either football, baseball, or basketball, and that was it. We didn't have soccer. There was no hockey. Lacrosse, none of that existed. Men's volleyball still doesn't exist really down here at all, but it's huge in other parts of the country, right? But down here we didn't play on Wednesdays, we didn't play on Sundays, and there were seasons for it. Like you didn't play baseball year round, you didn't play football or basketball year round. Today, it's a year round thing, and they talk about not specializing your kids at an early age, but you see more and more of it. It's crazy how you see these parents and they're trying to guide their kids into a different sport or, trying to specialize. It's like, man, let that kid let them be what they're going to be. If they're a good athlete, they're going to be a great athlete no matter what they do.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. I mean, Maya's been in club volleyball probably, I don't know, 7 years or so. And their schedule doesn't allow you or permit them to go play another sport. That's just, I was the same way as you, football, basketball, baseball, and, while growing up, and kids now today, it just doesn't happen. And there's such an investment that goes on, and, you want your kid to play, so they have to be specialized in it. And, I don't know. I mean, I picked up lacrosse in college only because I thought it was a cool, fun sport. And a couple guys that lived in the dorm were like, "Hey, well, like, you seem to be athletic enough," when we were playing pickup basketball, like, "Well, would you ever play lacrosse?" I'm like, "Well, what is it? What is lacrosse?" I mean, that's kind of what it was. Like, what is lacrosse? And, again, 1993, 4. And, they're like, "Oh, this, and, I picked the sport up, and it was great." I wish it, now it's growing and thriving all over the place. And, just having that cross skill, of doing that, but it doesn't really get allowed that much today.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard this, but years ago, Bill Belichick said that if he had an opportunity to coach any other sport, it would be lacrosse. I was like, wow. I just, he,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. His, I guess one of his kids, or maybe all of his kids or whatever, they were really into it, and he fell in love with it. He said, yeah, if there was ever a professional lacrosse league, he would coach it. I was like, wow. For him, of course, I don't really know a whole lot about lacrosse. I understand the concept of it, and I've seen it. It seems pretty straightforward, much like a hockey, in a sense that, you've got a goalie and you're just trying to throw a ball in a net. And
well, it's a little, again, when I was playing, it was a lot of club stuff, so we didn't really get into a lot of the technical stuff. But like, if it comes on in college when they're playing, I'll watch it. And I mean, you got face-off guys that are special guys. I mean, there are guys coming in and out all the time, and I'm like, what's going on? But there's a whole lot more into it now, as all the sports as they evolve. No different than our business. You know,
Right.
our business keeps evolving. You know, people are trying to make things a little bit easier, make things more efficient. But it's the constant part of it. But back to lacrosse. I mean, I think there's a lot of kids that find it enjoyable, right? So you're out there, you're running around, there's some contact, and just that ability to do that. And you mentioned something about men's volleyball. I'll tell you this, and I only know this because Maya's in club volleyball. More and more of the teams that clubs that are participating, which is a huge number in North Texas, they now have boys volleyball, and so you're sitting there watching. I'm watching Maya play, and then there's these boys that are playing, which you think, why are you not playing basketball? But they're playing volleyball. And it's wild how fast these balls are going back and forth.
Oh,
I mean, girls are as well, but I mean, the boys, it's now taking off. People have figured it out that, there's another sport that's out there for, to do.
yeah. And I think, sadly, I spent a number of years being a sports official. And
That's right. That's
right.
right.
Yeah. So, I just couldn't hang it up, because when, my kids got old enough and they were out of sports, I wasn't done with it. Right. I just loved it so much. So, I called a lot of basketball. That was my love, my passion. I really wanted to call some big time D1 stuff, but it just like everything else, you've really got to be super honed in on that craft. And it's hard to do it part time. You really need to, that's something that, there's a lot of camps out there and you would think just calling basketball games would be pretty simple. No, not at all. I mean, there is a game within the game with the officials, much like baseball, much like football, any other sport. And those guys and ladies that make it to that level, I have nothing but respect for them, because it is so hard to get to, especially baseball. It is so difficult. There's much like an athlete, I guess. You go to a lot of these camps and everything, and they're showcase camps, and they want to see your
Yeah.
mechanics. And you know, when you're focused on your mechanics, and especially in baseball, being a field umpire, watching a base or whatever, man, that play looks cut and dry on TV. You get within 10 foot of that play, it is not cut and dry. And those ladies and guys that do that, I much respect to those people. But yeah, I think a lot of it is. My point was, you see a lot of parents. Uh, I'll never forget. I was calling it was a seventh grade boys basketball game, and this is a C team game. So this is like, they weren't good enough to make the B team, much less the A team, right? It's 7:30 on a Saturday morning, and I've got a mom in the gym that thinks her kid's going to sign a D1 deal right after that game. And she was, but I think there's a lot of parents like that. They see an avenue to get their kids into school. So with all the popularity of the other sports popping up, the men's volleyball down here, hockey and things of that nature, right? They see an opportunity if they're, because there's not a whole lot of people doing it. The sad thing is you spend a lot of money on traveling to be able to play the better competition. Much like football teams, from as big as high school football is down here, you have teams from all around the country coming down here they're wanting to measure up. And if you can hang with the boys down here in Texas, generally you're going to be pretty good. Same thing with like basketball. Basketball has become huge down here to the point where these Texas high school teams can keep up with the New York teams, the Chicago teams, the teams on the West Coast, and it's really encouraging. Wrestling is becoming a really popular sport down here, and these kids are having to go up north, especially to the Midwest. Well, you grew up in Minnesota.
Oh, for sure.
Oh my gosh, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. Those are just hotbeds for wrestling. And we take some kids up there to go wrestle, and we come back, it's like, man, you have a whole different perspective of those kids that are doing it year round for 8, 10, 12 years. And it's a lot to keep your kids in sports.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, everybody wants their kid to do the best, and it is interesting. You said, when you go up to a different region, how how that is and what goes on. So,
Yeah.
I know, you just look at, you talked about high school football. I mean, look at what happens in the fall down here, right? So you got all these showcase things, Texas guys are going to Georgia, Florida guys are going to Texas. I mean, it's just, these teams are so crazy that, that they're showcasing and highlighting so much from a high school perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're up there near that Allen area with that huge high school football stadium. That thing is, I mean, you get people from all around the country that come here and they see it. They see it, you drive by and they see a big stadium and they're thinking that's college. It's like, that's a high school stadium. And, they're probably used to something that seats maybe 2,000 people. And, you bring your lawn chairs on a Friday night. It's like, oh no, man, towns around here, especially small towns, they shut down. It's,
For
it's,
sure.
it's football time. So yeah, man, all exciting stuff. Hey, talk to me about, I'm intrigued, man. And I know you and I have had some brief conversations about your mentor, and I keep going back to Michael. But man, I know he's been a big piece of your life, man. Tell me more about Michael and what he's meant to you.
It's, like I said, I don't know. I mean, I think he's probably one of the smartest business guys that I've been around. Just, kind of gets it. He kind of gets the big picture. You know, how about this? This is the best way to say it. He's no different than a coach, right? He knows which buttons to push and what to do. He knows what'll challenge you, what kind of drives you. And again, that's really what it is. And he also just really has a good time doing it. I mean, there's times at every job, right? You grind and you work. And then there's times that you just need to have fun doing whatever. So I think that's the best way to really kind of describe him. And again, we just kind of have this special connection. I don't know. I mean, I think, both of our names are Michael John, which actually is pretty interesting, but, he just, like I said, we just kind of have a connection that continues to work. And he comes to Dallas and once a year at least, so we get to see each other, which is great. And then, we just talk on the phone or whatever the case may be. But I guess he knows and has been around me enough. He knows what makes me tick. And then again, what if we talk professionally, right, then he knows what would be the better roles that I would go to. I mean, you and I were talking earlier about it. Like, there's a couple of guys in my life that they said, "Hey, we're going to Siberia and we're going to go work." And I'd say, "Okay, when are we packing our bags?" I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't care what the job is, whatever it is. I know I'd be challenged. I'd have a fun time doing it, and we would make it kind of work. And again, I'm fortunate to have a couple of those people in my life, but he's one of those guys that's what you would do, to do something for. So, and he's never going to put you in a situation that you're going to fail. How about that? And I think that's kind of the other part is, those guide rails that he would never, put you in some one of those situations.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good definition of a mentor, someone that, like we talked about, is they've already either seen the path that you're going down, been down the path you're going down, and they want the best for us. And those people are just invaluable to us. And you're right. I have a handful of people, as most do, it's, if they said, "Hey, I've got an opportunity," I'm certainly going to look at it. Just the simple fact that I respect them, I trust them. But there's a lot of people that brought an opportunity to me, much like everybody else. I'm probably not going to look at it. It's just not something within my wheelhouse. Yeah. But I will say, going from the financial background into flooring is something that I don't know that I could do. But kudos to you, brother.
Well, it was a short-term deal. They actually moved that business up to Lancaster, but the other part is that I think, from my perspective, I think I connect well with people. And so, we had this, I said there were 6 of us that moved down to Dallas for this flooring company. And so you got to remember, like any business, you have people that have been there for a super long time. And, there was a guy there and he started sweeping in the sawmills, and that's how long he'd been in the business. And I just kind of connected with him, and he taught me a ton about the flooring business. And there's some other guys there too, but Melvin kind of comes to my mind, and I was able to kind of connect with him and put his arm around me. And he was, eventually he was like, "Yeah, he's a friend of mine, not like a friend of ours," type of a thing, which it gives you acknowledgement that you at least try to learn. And in all businesses, you want to blend in, and that's where Reading is for me right now. We have a lot of people that are, there's people in the business that were in the truck business. There's some people that are from other suppliers. And then you have some people that are outside the business, and you need that meshing of people to bring new ideas to the table. And, that's one of the things that really brought me to Reading was this openness to have a variety of different backgrounds, because then that helps the business grow.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to a different podcast, but they were talking about teams and building teams and whatever else. And they said, that, and I actually referred to this in one of my interviews. I want a team of characters that have character. And, so that to me, I think, at least for my team, we have a bunch of guys that have a bunch of different backgrounds, but, bunch of characters that have character. And so, where you are and where you stand with all of them. But they're not all the same. None of us are the same. And I think that's a true definition of a great team when you have something like that.
Yeah. I think, I agree with you 100%. You and I have been in the car business for a long time, and you see these teams that, the leader just puts a bunch of guys and ladies around him that are just going to give him what he wants, he or she, give them the answers they want, but very rarely do you see, I don't want to say rarely, but oftentimes more than not, you'll see a group that has people that are willing to push back a little bit, like, hey, this may be where you want to go, but that's not where we need to go, kind of thing. And yes, I think the very successful teams out there, no matter what they do, they have a lot of people that have input that is respected, and it's transparent. They can have a voice. They can say what they need to say. And when you have that culture built, it's a very powerful culture, because you, as a team, you can do more than you can individually. We all know that. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in or what business you're in. But that's super important, to have those great people around you that are willing to stand up and say, you know what, Michael, no, I don't agree with what you're saying. I think we need to go down this path. Now, whether or not you as a business owner decide to go down that path, that's up to you, because your name's on the building, or, your name's at the bottom of the check, as we always say. But just having people around you that are willing and are able to really have the ability to say things is super important, in my opinion.
Well, and that's I think from my perspective, right? So being at GE for 10 years and sort of being there during when I was super impressionable, they one of the things that was always there was change is constant, right? Embrace the change. Think of the customer and value the customer first. I mean, and that's really where it was. There's a right way to say I disagree, besides just flat out saying I disagree. But you said the people that are saying, should we do this, and having the experience to be able to say, maybe this isn't the right way, or did we think about this? Because as you said, like more people thinking about it and talking about it, you're going to get the best ideas that come out of it. But someone has to be open, whether it's the owner of the business or, whomever's the, whatever the boss or whatever the manager, whatever it is, like whomever's in there, they have to be able to say, listen, this is an open forum. Like we need to get the best ideas out there. And that's where the team comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. How are things at Reading? I know you said you've been there for less than a year. It seems like it's been longer than that, man. It really has. I mean, in a good way, not in a bad way, in a good way, but obviously, that was previously General Truck Body here in North Texas. Well, actually in Texas in general. But how's that transition been going?
Well, it was one of the reasons why I actually, you know, agreed to come on to Reading. I think I've been a part of a couple acquisitions where at GE, again, kind of getting put in the right spots, where I was trying to go through some of the due diligence and the transition, and I was able to run one of the integrations where I was the person that was responsible for all that stuff. But it's a fun time. How about that? So anytime you have an acquisition or transitions are difficult, But for me, it's been fun. I think, the people that I work with and people what I say work for, but they want to hear what's happening. Like, give me the real scoop about what's going on. So if there's issues, we can fix them. But again, that was one of the reasons why I signed on to be the national account guy in Texas, is knowing that there were going to be some difficult times, but it's we're getting to we're getting a lot closer to being part of the Reading organization. You have systems and you have people and culture and those types of things. But again, I truly believe that we are closer to less disruption and less transition and more just kind of operating as business as usual. But any type of integration is always complicated, no matter what. But it's been great. I mean, I learned a ton. I learned a lot more, being at Dealer's Truck, which very well. I mean, they were buying things, and, we're Reading, we're manufacturing bodies as well as installing them. And, that just adds a lot of complexity to it. And their, their values are great. They're just different. It's less stocking of product, more just in time type of a thing. And so just, it's been good for me personally, as far as I know. And, but every job has a challenge, but right with an integration, it becomes a challenge, but that's why it's called a job. Like it's just a plain out and simple fact. But, like I said, the people within the organization have been great. I've enjoyed it a lot. I think there's been some things that I've noticed that, and some of it just from my general management background or, business background from GE or owning my own business, that, things sometimes don't make sense. And to a certain standpoint, that could be one of the things that slows me down, is that I like to be, when I see something like that, I want to be the fixer. I want to, like, this doesn't make sense. Let's fix it. Don't just glaze over it. Let's fix it and move on. So sometimes it's, with an integration, and you get caught up in some operational things, but that's just, it's part of it is because I care. I manage my job or, kind of my work as if it's still my own business, so I have a role as a salesperson, but all the stuff that I do is as if I manage a business. So sometimes I need to step a little bit away from it, because I'll get sucked into a lot of things that are just way outside of my scope. I wouldn't say they're not distracting; they're just kind of outside of the scope. But again, it's been fun. It to me, it hasn't seemed like it's been a year, almost a year, but because I enjoy the people I work with.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a lot of it too. Enjoying who you work with, where you work, and what you do, and things like that. What do you think about all the competition? And 10 years ago, there was there was just a handful of manufacturers out there that made bodies. Of course, you had Napa and Reading and Royal and Selzy, RKI, you had the big players. But now, man, it seems like over the last couple of years, you turn around, there's a new body manufacturer, a new flatbed manufacturer, mechanics, just everything. They're just new guys popping up everywhere. What's your thought on all that competition? How's it going to affect really what you guys do?
Well, so there's a couple of things. One, I think competition, competition pushes you to perform and be better. So, that's obviously one of the things that's there. Texas is a huge market. So there's a lot of people that want to play in Texas. So, now Reading is a little bit unique, where we as working for Reading Truck Equipment, we want to lead with our products, right? So Reading, and then our sister companies, Morgan, Lear, Masterac. But if you come to me and say, Michael, hey, I have a customer and he wants XYZ body, we're going to put that body on there. So we're a little bit different. We almost operate like an independent, but we have Reading as our background. But it is mind-boggling to me that there are that many people coming out with mechanics bodies and service bodies when the differences are very subtle. So every one of them has key differences, but at the same point in time, you just have more people coming into it, and again, manufacturers as well as installers. And I think that's that's where the challenge is. You have to engage with customers. You have to be truthful and honest. And if you can't do something, you need to tell them. And that's where, your performance and your team's performance kind of has to really be in sync in order to, to gain more customers or market share. Otherwise, there's just a lot of other options that are out there.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
it's hard I would imagine it's hard for someone like yourself, right? Yourself or a leasing company. They just see all these new people coming in and it's like, well, which one's better? Which one should I use? And, that's where some of these personal relationships come into play, because you need to lean on yourself and other people that in the industry. And I think that's where the connections come in. Kind of what you're trying to do is, these people have been doing it for a while. They're going to treat you like it's, like it's your customer. And I think that's where people are going to differentiate themselves. Now, the challenge, I think, for us, which you talked about it, right? We're not young, but we're not old, although there's days I feel old. But, how do we get more younger people to get into this business? Because it's a neat business. It's not easy to figure out, but it's a neat business. I wouldn't be in it for this long if had I not thought it was a great, fun business to be. And I think that's where the challenge as, us and this group, how do we get young people in there? How do we mentor them? How do we get them exposure to the right thing so that they can be successful and continue as the business continues to go? Because work trucks aren't going away. I mean, let's just call it what it is. I mean, it's only going to get busier and busier from that perspective. But it's the knowledge that we have that that we need to help and sort of mentor and pass on to other people. And I still get confused today. Somebody asked me about putting a bed on, and I'm like, yeah, we can do that. And I look at it, and it's it's a 56 CA versus a 60 CA, and I'm like, well, no, that should work. And then like, no, it really shouldn't. And so, there's always still challenges, even just knowing and keeping up with everything that we have to keep up on.
Yeah. Yeah. Touching on, our younger generation, generally what I've found is our younger generation and the population as a whole, they don't really understand what we do. And you've probably been put in the same situation as I have, is when people ask me, hey, what do you do? And I just tell them, I talk about a bunch of white trucks that nobody really wants to talk about. And that's the truth of it. But if, for example, if you ask somebody outside of the industry and they ask you what you did, let's say take your time when you were selling sprinters with Mercedes-Benz, and all you said was, hey, I sell Mercedes-Benz, they would automatically think about cars. Automatically. They would. And that's where they go. That's where they gravitate to, because why? You can see that car on TV. You can see the commercial. It's glamorized, especially a luxury brand name like that. But when you correct somebody, no, hold on, I sell the big white vans, and they're just confused. They're like, well, I didn't know Mercedes made a big white van. Well, yeah, they do actually. That's our industry summed up in a whole. It's, how do you think that food got to your table? Or how do you think, your electricity works, or that you're able to turn on a water faucet or whatever? Those are all trades, right? That a lot of people that are outside of, and I keep saying outside, that really aren't intimate with what we do. They don't understand it. They just know, okay, if I walk over to that switch, I can flip that switch and my lights come on. They don't really understand how did that happen. So, and that's where we come in.
Well, and that's, it's a great point. So there's a couple of things from that. I mean, that's where I think Reading, like, let's just step back and look at Reading. That's where we have facilities across the country where we invite people to come in and see how these trucks are put together, because they don't just show up that way. They just don't, like a crane truck just does it. Somebody has to do a lot of work to get that crane truck, even a flatbed. Someone still has to do a lot in order to do that. So, we invite people to come to our facilities. You try to engage with people at trade shows. And then, but when somebody new asks me what I do, I say, all these crazy trucks that you see out there in the world, dump trucks and crane trucks and all this stuff. We build and put those things together. And people are like, oh, but I mean, Pat, we had some people come to our facility and in Jensen and in Arlington, both, again, the two facilities that I kind of support the most, just and they were in our industry. They'd never been to a facility, never really understood why certain things, or why does it take so long to do this. And you're talking about even on a flatbed, what, maybe 15 pieces, whether, you're talking about hoses and everything else, 15 pieces all have to come together for that bed to get put on a truck. And so the logistics of getting all that stuff together, and having somebody manually build all that stuff, manpower putting those together, it's hard. And then you start to talk about a crane truck with hydraulics and everything else. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of components that all have to come together, and someone has to. And so it was just interesting because to see these people like, wow, you guys actually take this thing and the bodies are hanging, they're on gantry cranes that are hanging there. They move them down and put them on the beds, and they just didn't understand. They're like, oh, yeah, these trucks just show up like from the factory that way, like, again, my pickup truck comes from the factory, and I get it, but those other trucks, they have to move to a lot of different places in order to get on a dealership's lot or in the hands of a customer.
Yeah. There's a lot to it. And like you said, there's a lot of people that just don't understand how, I mean, okay, so let's take that gooseneck flatbed, for example, right? It's pretty simple. It's a big piece of steel that's going to sit on the back of a chassis, but it's got hoses. So it's got rubber and it's got steel and it's got aluminum. It's got all these things. And it just takes a lot of manufacturers to put all that together. Not everybody completely understands that.
Well, I think it's the world that we operate, I think, I've always been in all my roles, I've been curious. And so, being curious, you always ask more questions and understand. But again, the couple of examples I gave you, these people are out there selling product, like they're selling truck products, and they have no idea. And that's where, just, okay, now I understand why this is going on. Now I understand why it takes 5 weeks. But it comes back to just putting people in the right positions and showing them what goes on, and then they really understand how the business works, which keeps them in the business. And that's at least my opinion.
Yeah. There's got to be a bigger push to get younger generations into our business. Because you go to any fleet department and you're going to see a mixture. Generally, guys like me and you that are kind of right down the middle, because we've been in dealerships where there's guys in their mid 70s, early 80s with kids in there, and I'm say kids, they're not kids, young adults right now, young adults in their 30s, about the time we started to cut our teeth in the industry. The big thing is exposure, right? So the old heads, let's call them, they don't really need exposure. They've been doing it for 30, 40, 45 years or whatever. They've got a good book of business, and they're not really looking to expand and grow their business. Transversely, you have someone in the same office that is just getting started. They're just cutting their teeth, and they need exposure. And earlier you alluded to it, is how do we get exposure? Well, the days of going out and knocking on doors and trying to build a relationship with some sort of uh, procurement director, truck buyer, whoever it is, those days are very difficult. And COVID did that to us. COVID did. It pushed a lot of people out of the office. And now it's just an easy excuse when you go in to try to find that person. They can very easily say, well, for example, if you're a truck buyer, hey, can I talk to your truck buyer? Well, actually, Michael's the guy, but he works remotely now. He works from home. Well, we're not to a point now where I'm going to ask, okay, where does he live? Because I'm going to go call on him, right? That doesn't happen. That's unprofessional. We just don't do that. So, as a salesperson, that's kind of a dried up lead at that point. There's nothing you can do beyond, oh, well, he works remotely and you're not going to be able to talk to him, but I'll take your card and I'll make sure that he gets your information. 99% of the time, you're not getting that information because they're not passing it along. So what do you have to do? Well, I think that's why social media has become really a big proponent in our space. There are more people that are showcasing themselves, um, regardless of what they're doing. Influencers, if you want to call them that. But you see people at dealerships. You just pull up to a dealership, you'll see someone out there with their cell phone doing a selfie video, talking about who they are, where they are, what they do. That's really kind of what led to this whole platform that I've created is, I can take people that may have anxiety about going out and cold calling, or just networking in general. Give them a platform, sit on this podcast and talk for an hour or two. Let people fall in love with you, and they'll reach out to you. And it's a it's a warming mechanism for your potential customers that are going to be listening to this podcast or watching this podcast. So yeah, I think over the last 20 years, this is the direction that our industry is going, and I don't see it going back to where we were 20 years ago.
Well, I think it's what it does is it promotes authenticity, and it promotes connecting with people as they're scrolling. Let's just call it that, because that's what everybody does, right? Throughout the course of the day, you're scrolling, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, like that's what you're doing. So it helps you get out there and promote your brand and the authenticity that you have. And I think that's the importance of it. And it, now you're relevant. I know you and I watch or listen to the podcast Car Dealership Guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was reading something on one of his notes there that one of the dealership groups, I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but they have a bunch of dealership groups, like a bunch of buildings, right? They have a bunch of dealerships, and they said when they go to a dealership, they take 25 short videos each location. Think about that. They're going into a store, right? So you're the owner, director, manager of 25 stores. Every time you go to a store, which is, he said, I go to one store every day, you're taking 25 videos of what's going on for social media because you're promoting your relevance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what it does, it allows your potential customer to get a peek behind the scenes and see that authenticity, really, because when you're talking to a salesperson, as a general rule, when you first meet that salesperson, you're not really getting authentic people. You're getting salespeople. Because why? Because they want something that you have to offer. They want your business. It's when you sell them the second, third, 10th, 20th vehicle that they get authentic. You can really open up to that person. It's like, when we first start talking as a customer, salesperson relationship, as a salesperson, I'm not going to tell you everything that's going on in my day, because I'm going to highlight the good stuff, right? It's like, oh, everything's
Right.
fine. Everything's good. I'm knocking it out of the park. But then, a year later, you and I are talking. It's like, man, how you doing? Oh man, I'm struggling. It's just, I can't sell anything. Nobody's buying anything. Whatever. But that's authentic, right? Those are real struggles that people deal with. And as a customer, we've been together for now a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the number is. That's when honestly, kind of a mentorship pops out from that. It's like, hey man, have you thought about doing this, thought about doing that? And then it's just real conversation that takes a little while to get to, but when you get to it, those conversations are very meaningful.
For sure. And I think that's where, again, we talk about cell phones or social media or whatever it is, like the younger people, it's very transactional. So getting them to kind of step back and say, what am I going to get out of this? How do I get connected with someone who is, who's going to, keep the guide rails on, but, push me to get more exposure. Those are the things that are hard. Because as an older person, again, as someone who's been in the business for a long time, you need to cut that. But someone who's been in the business for a while, you can't just tell someone you need to go do X, Y, Z. You suggest things, or hey, this would be really great if you did this. So what you're trying to do is, if by encouraging them, do they pick up the ball and run with it? And then if they do that, now you know that you can kind of build a little bit more of a connection. But the days of telling someone like, if you want to succeed in this business, you need to do da 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 da. Those days kind of all sort of dismissed. And so so here's the other part. Let's go back to what you said with the competition. So competition's coming in. How are they advertising? They're not advertising. They're not sending out flyers. They're not like mailing stuff to dealerships. It's all social media. And, some of it's LinkedIn, but some of it's their page. Some of it's the people that work there. They're, hey, this is coming down the road. And, because that's just the space that we operate, because everybody has, the Google machine, if you will, like they're tied to it and they're scrolling, and, the analytics and everything else can target you and whatever you want to. But, so someone's looking for that authenticity of like, who do I want to work with? And that's really what it is. Who do you trust working with? And that doesn't come immediately. It doesn't come immediately, and so, and I think that's the hard part, is not just the sell, but then the after sell of what we do. Something goes wrong. Who's going to help and do that? And, I remember getting underneath the dump truck when it was August out, because the dump truck had to go, but the wiring was messed up, and I didn't know how to rewire something, but thank God I had a phone and FaceTime. And it's like, okay, unplug this, do this. And by the time I was done, an hour and a half later, it was like, well, just throw these clothes away, because, they're soaked and whatever else and dirty. But, then, for instance, if that were you, but that salesperson knows I'm going to do whatever to make sure that this happens and gets taken care of.
Yeah.
And so that's just an example that I use, but I didn't want to be underneath the truck in August on the blacktop and sitting out, like rewiring something, but that was the only option I had. It was the only option I had.
Yeah. Well, and again, it leads back to our customer service, right? So you do whatever it takes to take care of your customer. And, when you do those things, so, that customer recognizes that. They do. 100% of the time they recognize that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's awesome. You said something earlier. It kind of got me to thinking about something. I'm going to tell you the worst piece of advice I've ever gotten in our industry. I want to know yours, but let me tell you mine first. I started off in the car business, selling cars, and the reason I got in the car business, I was young, starting up a young family, and I felt like I didn't get a very good deal on a car that I bought. And I remember going home and feeling really bad about it. And I told my wife, I was like, I feel like I got screwed on that car deal. And, this is in the late 80s. You didn't have the information that we have today,
Yeah.
right? To know whether you did or didn't. It was about a feel. And I told her, I was like, I'm gonna go get a job selling cars, because I want to know if I got, put together or not. Well, fast forward, it took me, probably 6 months to land a gig, and I started selling cars. And then as I started learning, I quickly realized, okay, well, that, I didn't get screwed. It wasn't that bad of a deal, but it felt like that, right? So in today's world, you can do so much research that kind of prevents you from getting put together like that. But I'll never forget one of my very first sales managers. They partner you with they partner you with a seasoned vet, right? And they tell you, or that at least this guy told me, I want you to do exactly what he does and don't vary off of it at all, right? That was the worst piece of advice I could have ever gotten, because, and I'll never forget the guy's name. His name was Bob McClellan, and he was a desk manager. And he was an old head whenever I got in the business in the late 80s. So, he had come up in the business from the 50s, back whenever, like what you alluded to, you have to do business this way. There's no deviating from that. Well, you look up 75 years later and it's completely different, because the thing that I had troubles with is trying to do it exactly the way that guy did it. And that was just not authentic. I tried doing and saying, and I took notes. I said exactly what he said at the time that he said it. And guess what? I struggled. But, I think a lot of people can relate with this when you first get into the business is, okay, he didn't necessarily mean do exactly what he does, but I think the message now is figure out what they do and watch a lot of different people and figure out what works for you. That's the way it is today. And it wasn't that way, 30, 40 years ago. It wasn't. It was do exactly what they do. Don't vary off of it. And if you can do what they do, you'll be very successful. Horrible, horrible advice, but it is what it is. So what's the worst piece of advice you've ever gotten?
I mean, I think, and again, I'm going to not say who it was or where it was or whatever, but it was just like, yeah, if you get someone and they say they want something, you just tell them you can do it. And, you know how that goes, right? Like, I mean, you just end up fumbling through whatever that request is. The example I'll give you is, which actually just recently happened. The guy was like, "Hey, can you build water trucks?" And I'm like, "You talking like big water trucks that spray the water on the side of the roads?" And I'm like, "I think we can. I have to get back with you, but I also know some people that do that." And then, what the advice of the other person said was just tell them we can do it, and then we'll just kind of figure it all out. And that just makes people so much more upset because you're not, just be upfront with them. And, again, that's been a lot of trial and error from my perspective. But, that was at a young age and where you were like, okay, I just need to get somebody and get them in and, like put it together and whatever the case is. And it's like, no, the adage of it's okay to say, no, I don't know. And I will get back with you as long as you get back with them is, and that's hard for people to say. It's really hard for people to say because it's hard to get it's hard to get a phone call back. It's hard to get a meeting with someone. And so when you get that, you want to do anything and everything you can so that you just, they don't go and look somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the tough part about saying, I don't know, we feel like it's an indictment on our intelligence, right? So, yeah, the old school mentality was, well, never say no to a customer. You always tell them yes. Well, okay, like for example, if a customer, comes up to you and says, let's take a mechanic's truck. Hey, can you put a 10,000-pound crane on an F-250? And you say yes, you've lost all credibility at that point because what that says is that either A, I don't know, which is probably the case. B, I'm going to do something that's unsafe. And there's a lot of people in our industry. I don't want to say a lot. There's a few people in our industry that'll test you just to see if they can trust you and see what your knowledge level is. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with, well, I've never seen one. Doesn't mean we can't do it. Let me find out and get you an answer. I think more people will respect that response than, oh yeah, for sure. If you already have them, then yeah, absolutely, we can do it, right? So we hear that a lot. Well, I have some now. Well, that doesn't make it right, and that doesn't make it safe. That just means that someone was willing to put something together that may not have, been the case. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that out there. What's the best piece of advice you've ever got?
Yeah, again, I go back to some of the stuff that Michael said. The one I'll tell you what, the car dealership one that I had when I worked at an actual dealership, and this I think still holds true, and it held true to when we had our landscape business. So a guy was coming in to buy a Sprinter, and just beating me down, wearing me down from price, right? Like wearing me down. Hey, oh, can I get one of those hats as well? Can I da 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 da? So anyway, we finally gave him a number, and he didn't buy the vehicle, right? Didn't buy the vehicle. He went and bought it down in Georgetown, and he came back for service, and I'm like, "What's going on? Like, what's happening?" And he's like, "Well, they gave me, it was $100 less." I'm like, "Okay, $100 less. You drove, back, and whatever the case may be." But anyway, the manager at the time, his name is Ted Petrocco. He's still in the business. He goes, "Michael, the people that, constantly beat you down you'll always have something that lingers on with them versus the guy that's like, hey, here's my best price. This is what it is." Those people you have a better relationship with because they understand everyone has to make money, but at the same point in time, it's fair. So if you treat people fairly, you're not going to have all of this, constant. But the guy that says, I need it cheaper, there's always something else that lingers, right? Well, my tire's wrong, or this is wrong, or this is wrong. There's always something. So that, from a day-to-day dealership perspective, that was one of the lessons that I learned. And again, I think it carried a lot into the landscape business that we had because people were always asking, well, can you do it cheaper? Can you do it for less? And I'm like, the line we used, which is if I'm going to give you a discount, I was charging you too much to begin with.
Yeah. 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 That's solid right there. Yeah, for sure. That's a good way of not answering the question, right? Yeah.
But I understand people want to ask that, but again, I think you and I, we've known each other enough. Like, I'm going to give you a fair price, and and that's how I'm going to do business, because I don't want to sell you one vehicle. I don't want to sell you two vehicles. I want to sell you, and I've been in this business a long time. I want to sell you vehicles for the next 20 years, and that's And that's how you build that relationship. So that's probably one of the other one. And the other one, the other part is this: if you mess up, own up to it.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
You just got to own up to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably the hardest one, is when you mess up, is making the phone call. Or it's not even necessarily you messing up. It's the deal got messed up, regardless of what it is, right? There's a problem. Now, as I've matured in our industry, right, I've
Good way
picked
to
things
say
up,
it.
right? I've picked things up along the way that have helped. One of the things that I learned years ago, and as you know, in our industry, there's constantly problems because there's so many components to do what we do, that there's a problem. So whenever I would have to call a customer about a problem, I learned that just because I thought it was a problem doesn't necessarily mean the customer does. So I adopted this theory of, for example, if you're the customer, I would call and go, Michael, look, I got some news. You get to tell me if it's good or bad. And I just left it at that, because then I brought your defense wall down. Transversely, if I called and said, Michael, I got some bad news. Well, regardless of what I'm about to say, in your mind, it's bad news. And, I can't tell you how many times I've presented, hey, Michael, look, I've got some news. You get to tell me if it's good or bad. And then I present the news, and then 90% of the time the customer go, oh, that's not that bad. That's easy. We can work around that. Oh, good. Okay. Well, then, I just started adopting that as to, well, I don't know, yeah, it's bad to me, but it may not be bad to you. You get to make the decision. So, just little things like that, as we mature in as people and as in the industry, it's like, hey, it may not be that big a deal.
But Pat, that goes back to having people that have been in the business for a long time. So, again, I've just the past couple months, we've had some things, again, as they do in our business, delays and whatever else. And, I sent a note to this guy, just said, hey, we messed up. That was just like, why is this not getting done? I dig into it. We messed up. You know what his response was? Thank you for just telling me you messed up. How do we fix it? Right? Like, what are we doing about it versus, well, I don't know what's going on. And, like, we dropped the ball. Here's what we're doing. And I think that just owning that is kind of critical, but that's where you need people that are comfortable with what they're doing, as well as being able to kind of dive into some things versus, just pushing it off on someone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. And you and I have talked about this one. It's really tough as a young professional to be able to say no to anything, because we want everything, right? And that's one of the very first things I tell some of the younger individuals that are trying to get in this business, is not all business is good business. And you need to understand when to say no, because at some point you're going to have to say no, because if you can't learn to say no, the no will come find you. And how many times have we taken on business, taken on a deal, taken on a customer, whatever, and you regretted it? It's like, I knew my gut was telling me not to do this deal. It's falling apart. This isn't right. And then you spend so much energy trying to make things right. And honestly, it never gets right. Everybody just gets to a point where it's acceptable. It's like, okay, I didn't get what I wanted. You didn't get what you wanted, but at some point we're going to be able to accept what it is, right? And those are tough conversations, but had we just said no, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I can't do that. No, I won't do that. It would just make things a whole lot easier. And that's what we've all learned as we get older, for sure.
Well, I think, again, that part of what I said is, my job history, as well as the experiences that I've had in those jobs, have helped me get to that point. But I think from my perspective, it was super critical when we owned our own business, because guess what? As you know, Karen and our names were on there. We were making the decisions, but there were some people that we were like, you know what? We appreciate what you guys want to do, but we're just not, this is not a job for us. And that's how we framed it. Like, this is not a job for us, because we knew there was going to be continuous and continuous and continuous. So we'd rather, instead of having a customer that wasn't happy, because in the landscape business, a lot of it's word of mouth of just referral perspective. But we just decided to walk away from some business because we knew that it was going to be challenging during, and then after, the installation was complete. And again, that's the maturity of, when do you walk away from something? It's hard, and again, especially as a small business, you wanted everything. Like I want
Yeah.
it all, but,
Yeah.
there has to be a time. And I think had I had a small business when I was younger, I would have fallen into a lot of those traps versus when I was older, you knew when you could walk away and concentrate and focus your energy on something else. And I think that it was super helpful, that experience. And one of my other mentors told me this, and back to that, and is, he said, Michael, like, don't ever not take a job because you think you don't want that job, but take the job and then you'll know if you don't want to do that job. Like you may be presented with an opportunity, but it may turn out differently, but then you don't want to do that job. Right now, all you're saying is, nope, I don't want to do that. Now, again, within your industry, et cetera, like I'm not going to go be an accountant because I know I'm not going to want that job, but, it's use it for the experience. You will gain something from that job no matter what.
Yeah.
I guess is kind of the way to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, you guys have owned, do you guys still own the landscape business, or did you?
No,
Oh, you don't.
well,
Okay.
we sold it. So
How was all that, man? I know that's down here, I say down here, and landscape's big just anywhere, right? I mean, but it's different. It is different down here. It's, I guess, more lawn maintenance is a year-round entity, whereas it's not in other parts of the country. But you guys really didn't focus on lawn maintenance per se. You were doing landscape. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a kind of a complete redesign. You show up to your house, what do you want to do, or what do you recommend, and basically transform someone's front yard / backyard, and within a matter of a week, which is cool. I mean, talk about satisfying.
Yeah.
Like, you look at a before picture on a Monday and you look at what it looks like on a Friday, and it's mind boggling what something can get done. And we didn't really have a lot of big equipment. I mean, it was like 5 guys, a couple trucks, and a trailer. I didn't have Bobcats. I didn't have any of that stuff. I shouldn't say we, because that's a big expense. And oh wait, by the way, when they're moving that thing around, guess what? A lot of stuff breaks. So stick to what you're good at. Communicate with the customer, and we had a thriving business, and it got to the point where it was either we're going to grow it substantially or we're going to sell it. And someone said, I want to buy your business. And so, negotiating, buying the business, negotiating, selling the business, I think, again, being a little bit older in my career, Karen as well, just being a little bit, older in her career, we just knew a lot more and were able to kind of navigate some of those complexities. But, I never thought I would do that. I never thought I always wanted to have my own business, but it just got to become so, Sunday afternoon, somebody's like, hey, I got a sprinkler leak, what are we going to do? Well, what do you want me to do? Right. Like, but we treated it as if it was a profession versus, just a lot of people down here don't have the communication and the understanding. Like, okay, we're done for the day. Here's what's done. We're done for this. We check your sprinkler. I know more about sprinkler systems than I ever want to know about. But again, there's just a lot of people that don't take the care to put that together like that. But it was, it was very rewarding, fulfilling, when you see people and they're like, wow, this is what it used to look like. And you guys did this within a week, but it was challenging. I mean, it was super challenging. You had 5 families that depended on you. I mean, if we didn't have business, they weren't getting paid. And that, having that is it wasn't a fear. It was just more of a driving factor.
Yeah.
To make us better.
Yeah. It's just kind of something that lingers, because when it's just you, when we were young, and then you get married, now it's you and your spouse, and then you have kids, now it's you and your spouse and your kids in the house, and then it just starts to multiply. Then you add the element of employees and their spouses and their kids and their livelihood. That's a whole different animal there, man, when you're responsible, because I'm sure there's probably days where you made sure they ate and they got paid, and you would worry about yourself later, right? I mean, that's what you have to do as a business owner.
Yeah. And we really tried to take care of the guys that were working for us. We again, unlike, we gave them vacation time. You guys get 2 pair of boots or 3, whatever it was. Like, I wanted them to be safe. So safe, it was, I never wanted them to be put in a situation I wouldn't put myself in. How about that? So, their boots are getting worn out, and so they needed new boots. Okay, great. We're going to buy you a set of boots because it was just important for us to make sure that they had everything they could do to do the job and be safe doing it. But, we treated them well. And I'll tell you, it's funny, as a small business, we needed the guys that worked for us, which worked for us for the entire time we were there. We needed them as much as they needed us. We needed them to do their jobs, but they needed us to get the sales and get the business.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting. You see it at a very, very micro level about how a big business like Reading, it's still the same. You need the people that are making the product. You need the people that are installing the product. We all need each other. But with a small business like that, you see it at a very micro level.
Yeah. That's a very good way to put it. But even at that bigger level, like you talk about with Reading, when you stop and look at, okay, well, what did it take to get the steel? What did it take to get those rubber hoses? What did it take to get those clamps? Well, a lot of times there's those smaller businesses like you talk about that are really dependent on what Reading brings to their table for their livelihood, or, any manufacturer for that, whether it be Knapheide or whoever it is, right? Stellar. They're reliant, it's like, look, I make these little widgets, and 90% of my business comes from the Reading group. They need you guys out there selling that stuff so they can, they can keep food on their table. So yeah, there's a lot of people that when you stop to look at everything are dependent on so many other people they don't even know, right? There's somebody out there that, you're right, there's somebody out there that makes a little widget for Reading that doesn't know you, but is really and you, as with them, you're relying on them too to be able to get the product, to be able to take care of your customer, which in turn really is their customer as well. So yeah, it's when you stop and look at it in totality, it's really kind of it's a large process, but there's a lot of people that are involved in that process as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, not off the top of my head, that there's like a business that they make it, they sell it. There's just a lot of dependencies to it, and that's where getting people exposed. Again, we talked about this, right? Getting people exposed to the bigger picture. Here's how it works, right? The tires and everything else get put on the chassis, and then that chassis comes somewhere else, and this person does this, and this person does this, and it's not an easy thing to just pick up. It is not.
Yeah. I mean, even if you look at it, okay, so when you said that, my mind starts thinking, okay, well, who is less reliant on people? All right. So let's say, for example, a farmer. They're gonna take something out of the ground that they've grown and be able to take it to market. But it's not as simple as that. It's okay, what machinery did they have to use to be able to put that seed in the ground? And, how did we water it? Well, watering systems, there's engines in those watering systems. And, there's a lot of components, even as something as simple as, I'm going to put it in my backyard and I'm going to take it out of the yard and harvest it and be able to sell it to you. There was a lot that went into that. And we really don't think about it. It's like, oh, well, those are homegrown vegetables. Yeah. I grew them in my backyard. Okay. Well, there was a lot to even put together for that, because you had to get it from here, from your house up to here. I'm assuming you were in a vehicle. Well, that vehicle probably had, umpteen thousand people that put that vehicle together. So yeah, everything takes a lot of people to make it happen.
Well, but it all takes it takes a lot, but the immediacy, the immediate satisfaction that we all now have is constantly present. Constantly present. I mean, you and I know this. I could place an order for Amazon, and I'm getting it within 8 hours. If I, depending on what it is, I'm getting it. So that awareness of how that all happens kind of goes away, because you can get something to you so easily.
Yeah, for sure. Along those lines, what do you think's the future of our side of the industry? Where do you see it going over the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, I think, if you're talking about the commercial vehicle, and I think you and I talked a little bit about it, a lot of it's going to be, I think there's two things that are dependent. Some of it is going to be how dealerships evolve, meaning, I don't know this for a fact. I have no basis for this, but I feel like if I'm buying a vehicle, and you know this maybe a little bit more, the dealerships are going to become like an Apple store. I'm going to order this thing. I'm going to get it within 2 weeks. and someone's going to show me how all the electronics and everything works for it. It's just a delivery point. There's less selling because there's so much information out there for a consumer. And then you're going to be able to get the products quickly. So, a dealership may have all their colors on each different type of vehicle, and they maybe have a couple extras there. And so, yeah, you want this thing, I'll get it to you in a couple of weeks. Now that's on the retail side. Commercially, you're still going to need people like us. I think I think it's just going to be more of there's going to be less people that know really what's going on. So there's going to be far more and more value, but it, there's still that need for these products immediately. So how do you work with people to make that happen versus, I think let me set that. The better way to sum it up, I don't think you're going to have dealerships with hundreds and hundreds of vehicles sitting on their lot. I think it's going to be more of, how do I work with the supply chain to get you vehicles as immediately as possible, or plan when you can get them more. But what we do is so labor intensive and so logistical challenges that it's going to be hard for it to evolve. I think materials may change as technology continues to exist, but it's really the people that are performing are going to gain more and more of that business. And how do you connect with the people that's where I think the business is going to continue to go, because I think we're going to have a generation of people. You mentioned it. There's a lot of people in our business that are 65, 70 and older that are going to be retiring soon. And that's a lot of knowledge that's going to be going out the door. Where do you replace that knowledge? That pool of people gets smaller, but, and that's why I think you have a lot more of, competition, because, hey, if you can't get it, I know somebody else that can get it to you a lot faster. And that's where the competition is. So I don't know if I really summed it up very well from where I think it's going to be, other than knowledge is going to be key to helping customers find what they want.
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I know, depending on who you talk to, there is a thought of, for example, the bailment pools. The bailment pools are going to go away. I'm like, how? I don't see that. I don't see it going away, because I just don't see, and let's talk about the big three, right? Ford, GM, Ram. I just don't see them implementing ways to be able to give you a finished product off the assembly line. I don't see it, because there's too many different combinations and specializations that goes into um, a finished product, right? Two different plumbing companies are going to have two different ways of going about doing their business. So you can't, in my opinion, you can't just cookie cutter that and say, well, this is the plumbing truck and this is the only one that we offer. I don't see that being the case. I don't see how that can happen without too much resistance from the end user saying, look, we don't operate in vans. We operate in pickups with service bodies. That's how our business works. Um, Regardless of why that is, it doesn't really matter. That's why you and I have to have so much knowledge about so many different industries, so many different trades, as to how they go about doing their business, to be able to make it more efficient for them. That I just, at least over the next 20 years, I don't see that being the case on our side of the industry.
Well, change is hard, right? No matter what. So changing and taking away the bailment pool, I think, becomes complicated. Now, this is where, if you talk to people at Reading, Jason Cannell, who runs Reading Truck, he says, I want all my facilities to operate the same way. So if we have a customer that operates anywhere across the country, they're going to have the same experience. Now, getting people to operate that way, you have to be on the same systems, which we are trying to do. But, but still, that plumber, you're not just going to have one package for that plumber, because somebody else is going to specialize in something or do something. And, that's where you have to have some of that flexibility. But, again, drawing on what Reading is doing or wants to do is, whether you sell it in Dallas or you sell it in Colorado or you sell it in Iowa, it's going to be the same type of experience, and we are going to build it to you the same way. But that takes time. But back to your question about bailment pools, it's hard. I mean, think of all the people that you have to change in order for those bailment pools to happen. You're talking about the manufacturers. You're talking about upfitters like us and independents that are out there that have those pools. And then you're talking about dealerships that depend on those pools in order to get product. So I don't think they're going to go away. In my opinion, I think that, they are going to, which they do to a certain standpoint, right? Monitor the supply and demand. But I don't think they're ever going to go away. I don't think they're going to do, in my opinion, I don't think they're going to give more individuals or companies access to that bailment pool. But I just think it's something that's out there to stay.
It's interesting that you brought that up, how Reading has taken on the approach of, let's say, a McDonald's. You can go to a McDonald's anywhere virtually in the country. I don't want to say across the globe, but let's just take the United States. And if you order their staple Big Mac, generally it's going to taste the same at every location. I think that's good. Obviously, it's worked for them, but I don't know how it's going to work. Let's say, for example, we don't sell a whole lot of aluminum product down here in Texas, but aluminum has been a very big staple up north because of the rust factor. Well, we don't have to deal with rust here. So if you take a facility here, and let's just take Reading out of the equation, regardless of who it is, and say, you know what, guys here in North Texas or Oklahoma or, Central Texas, we're going to teach you how to install and repair aluminum bodies. Okay, I think it's good to have that knowledge. You might use it 5% of your whole workspace because we just don't encounter it. So I don't, in my opinion, I don't know that that's the best way to go about it. I think it's okay that certain regions do business a different way. For example, you and I have looked at a contractor's body. I think a contractor's body is one of the best bodies you can get out there. Why don't they sell in North Texas? I can't answer that question. I have no idea. But you can't give one away down here. But on the West Coast, they're huge. You see them everywhere. But here, it's just guys and business owners as a general whole, they don't see the value in it.
Well, so let me. I think I mean, let me step back to what you said from a Reading perspective. So what they're trying to do is the process is the same, right? So
Okay.
you're going to have something different, right? Like up there and up in the north, you're going to have you're putting snowplows on, right? We're not putting snow.
Right.
Actually, to be honest with you, I put 2 snowplows on before, and you know what they were for? The city of Fort Worth. They were for Dickies Arena. That's how they were spreading. They were spreading the dirt around, but it's not it's the customer experience,
Gotcha.
not the process, not the installation. It's the hey, we get an order, it goes through here, purchasing gets here's how it works systematically. So again, you may have a contractor's body in California, but the getting everything to the point where you're installing whatever that is, that experience is the same, because if you have a company that's across the country, you have to be that way in order to instill trust in the customer as well as execute. So, like I said, I hear what you're saying of like you can't make it all the same, but making it consistent, then you could, then you're saying these processes are all the same across our platform. So that way I know we are executing how, you don't have to say, well, it's different in Council Bluffs versus down in Dallas. That conversation doesn't happen. Like, here's what should be happening. And here's when you're explaining to a customer, they get it, that this is what's happening.
And I think that's valuable. I really do. And that's something that you and I and some other of your colleagues have tried to do over the years. Because along your point, let's say, for example, the way business typically happens today, I'm going to get someone in North Texas reach out to me, or wherever they're from. It doesn't matter. They're going to reach out to me and say, hey, I really want some of these bodies that you have to offer. Great. Okay. Hey, is there any way, I've got an office in Buffalo, I've got an office in Charlotte, and I've got another office in Boise, Idaho. Is there any way I can get that exact same build but I really don't want to pay for the logistics of it. Can you have that same build built in those regions? That's difficult. That's very difficult, because now I've taken someone that is a specialist here, built it their way. And now I'm going to say, I need the exact same truck built in Boise, in Buffalo, and in Charlotte by 4 different companies, independents, right?
Right.
That's the tough part, because now logistically, I have to make sure that I get to Boise to meet with whoever I'm going to have install it there, and take them a truck and say, this is exactly how the customer wants it built. They want their fleet to look identical. When you look at every hood out there, you can't tell who installed what. That's difficult. It really is, because that company now I'm bringing into the fold, let's say it's an upfitter or a manufacturer, it doesn't matter. And I say, hey, look, this is what we do. Well, they may not have the relationships that this firm has down here to say, well, I can't get that product, or I can't get this or that. Okay, can we substitute this? No, the customer is very specific. They want this particular light. They want this light mount. They want this underbody box. This is exactly what they want. That's where the challenges come in, because, for example, in Boise or wherever, I'm just picking Boise, they may not have accessibility to the same products that we have down here. Years ago, um, I sold a truck to a guy that was in, I think he was in Alabama. Anyway, um, this was early in my career. So I agreed to bring his new truck to him, and I was going to take his trade in. So we met in Vicksburg, Mississippi. That was right. But, hey, whatever. It was a road trip for me. It was a road trip for him. It all worked out. When I picked up his trade, I saw a toolbox on the back. It was made by Cam Locker. And I thought, man, I've never seen one of these boxes before. It was a crossbody box.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
right. It was so well built that I wanted one for my personal vehicle. It was a challenge because nobody here even heard of Cam Locker. So I had to reach out to Cam Locker direct and say, hey, do you have any representation in the Dallas-Fort Worth area? And they're like, no, actually, we don't. I was like, well, I want one of your toolboxes. They sold me one directly. Well, that you extrapolate that to a large company that wants to build 50, 100, 300 vehicles across the country, is how do you unionize that to the point to where everybody gets the same product, and at the same time we're trying to save the customer logistical costs of having to move that vehicle all around the country regardless of where it pops in from. The fact that Reading is trying to implement those practices to where I can call you or I can call your colleague in any part of the country and they can have the same process, it makes the job easier for the salesperson, the end user, and everybody that's involved. I think that's a great plan of action.
But and again, it's continuing to evolve and continuing to move because Reading has purchased companies. So you're trying to integrate culture, systems, and that's some of the difficulty. But think about it from a sales perspective. As if you again use the scenario you had, hey, I got people across the country. If I had to deal with 5 separate processes in order to make those orders work, it would be a nightmare. It would just be a nightmare. So that's the beauty of where we're going. That's the vision of where we're going. But again, because of the growth that Reading has had and the acquisitions they have had, it's it just doesn't flip. It's not one of those things that happens tomorrow. So there's a really great plan that's going on, and they're executing it every time they continue to move more over. Like they convert one building and one system, they learn and continue to learn and continue to learn. So the nice part about that is if there's more acquisitions in the future, there's a lot of knowledge that people are building up in order to make those a little bit easier to execute.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think as long as Reading and other manufacturers really are basically gobbling up, these smaller companies, that's where the challenge comes in, right? Because that smaller company's been doing it a certain way for a long time, and they could be open to change, it could be resistant to change, but the uniformity of what Reading is trying to put together, I think is great.
Again, one of the other reasons why I decided to come here is you step back and see the bigger picture of here, what they're trying to do. Again, as any change is not easy to do, especially when you're dealing with culture and systems all at the same time. But they continue to learn, and when they learn, they speed up and slow down based off of that, that kind of availability.
Yeah, for sure. How many locations does Reading have now? Do you know?
It has 24 locations.
24. Okay. And that's obviously across the United States.
Yes.
Okay. Very nice. And growing.
Yeah, the bulk of it, the bulk of it's in the East Coast.
Yep.
That's why they purchased the General Truck acquisition, because they had very little presence here.
Yes.
Which General Truck did. So, as a strategic point, PepsiCo, our parent company, is in Houston. So, kind of a nice little feather to be kind of close to PepsiCo. But it was a strategic move to get into Texas versus going from a greenfield. So, the bulk of it's out in the East Coast, but they, go all the way out to Arizona and Salt Lake City and Colorado. I think those are kind of the three furthest west.
Yeah. No, playing California, I think.
Not yet. And I say not yet with I have no knowledge about that's way above my pay grade. Other than today, we do not have something in California.
Yeah.
So who knows what somebody's working on behind the scenes.
It could be something working. Yeah, it could be something working.
By the time this thing gets published, it's like, oh yeah, we have a place in California.
It could be. It could be. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of positive growth that's happening in our industry right now. A lot of new manufacturers are hitting the scene. It seems like a lot of those manufacturers are coming here to Texas, because for obvious reasons. But I can see there's been more influx of change over the last 10 years than I think there was in the previous 20 before that. In the 30 plus years that I've been in the industry. Like I said, you kind of knew the big players, and the big players, there really wasn't a whole lot of change. They were just getting bigger, things of that nature. But with all the other manufacturers coming in, it'll be challenging for sure.
Well, here's the other part that, again, having Texas as a territory, been in Texas, selling in Texas, there's a lot there, and General Truck did this before. They would build the products and then ship them to across the country. I mean, you're talking about $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 that you're adding on top of a vehicle price, and it's money. It's real money, no matter what kind of business you're in. And I think that's an advantage of that Reading has, and people are starting to become more comfortable in that situation versus I need to see all these trucks built before they go out the door. And that's where, again, the vision of Reading saying, whether you're going to order it in Houston or you're going to order in Colorado or you're going to order in Bowmansville, Pennsylvania, you're going to get the same product, the same experience. And then obviously we're going to save you money shipping it across the country.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's smart. Again, this is something that I looked at trying to implement, 15 years ago, was how do I save the customer the logistics? Because at the end of the day, the customer's got play in multiple points across the country. Like you said, those are real dollars, but we did what we always did. It's like, let me say what I have on the yard, and you pull up to a customer's facility, no matter where it was, odds are their fleet was not uniform. It just wasn't. There was a mixture of there was a mixture of utility bodies, there was a mixture of equipment, there was a mixture of makes. They had just all the OEs in there, which I don't know that. I still feel like having a good mixture of OEs in your fleet is not a bad idea. Whether it be Ford, GM, Ram, whatever it is, I think having a good mixture is a smart play. Obviously there's a lot of end users that feel like they want a very uniform fleet, whether it be all Ford, all GM, all Ram, whatever the case is. They still feel the importance of having that. I think as a business owner, I would be open to having all makes in my fleet, to be honest with you.
Well, so think about what we talked about with Reading. So Reading now almost provides someone the ability to have, you can single source your products from Reading, but I can source it and build it in multiple locations, almost acting like dual suppliers for them. So, if something catastrophic happens in Houston, and I have part in building some of it in Colorado, you keep using Colorado or Florida. Now I've almost made it so that you have dual suppliers because you have multiple options in certain locations.
Yeah.
And I think post COVID, or now even in today's world, a lot of people are saying, I can't just be a single supplier. I can't just have one supplier if you're a large fleet, because if something happens, there's delays, there's whatever it is, you're latched onto that and you have nowhere to kind of go. And I think that's what a lot of people now are looking to, these larger companies. And again, that's where I think the benefit of Reading Truck, you have multiple locations that can serve as multiple suppliers for you, but it's underneath one umbrella.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's smart. I mean, I think what we're going to find is you're going to see more and more manufacturers adopting that theory as well, especially as they start to broaden. Knapheid's done that for years. Reading is now doing that. I think there's going to be more of it, especially when you start to get these special interest groups that are diving off into the middle of our industry. Whereas before it was, I keep going back to Knapheid and Reading. They were kind of the big players in the industry, and now you're starting to see these. These parent and sister companies that are investment groups that are diving off in the middle of our industry.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man,
for sure.
Well, buddy, this has been it's always a blast talking to you. I mean, I feel like I learn so much every time we talk, that I do, I really do. And I appreciate your time, and I'm glad we got to do this.
I appreciate it. Like I said, you and I have talked about it, and I think, our friendship goes deeper, obviously, a lot more than the professional. When I told you I was going into landscape business, you were like, "What are you talking about?" But these types of connections, and I think what you're doing is super, super great for the industry. And I want to see what continues to happen, and I want to come back on, and and at the end of the year, and maybe we do a big roundtable for like your 100th episode or something like that, and get a bunch of guys together. But I think it's great. I think it's a great way to connect. And for me, it's just nice to be able to help support someone who's been so supportive of me.
Yeah, I appreciate that, brother. Yeah, and I'm your biggest cheerleader, man. I'm always pulling for you. Glad you're doing well. Hey, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that? Give us some contact information.
You can call my cell phone. It's the only, you can call my cell phone at 214-914-2554, or M Hottinger, which the name is on the screen, MHOTTINGER at readingtruck.com. And if it's not something I can help you with, or it's somewhere else in the country, I'll get you to the right person, make sure you get taken care of. But, like I said, just be able to reach out, and if they need something, just give me a holler.
Yeah, man. Perfect. I'm glad, like I said, I'm glad we're able to do this, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, man, we got to go play some golf before it gets super, super hot. So
yeah.
We definitely need to go do that. So let's plan on getting that on book sometime soon.
I'm down, man. I've got clubs ready to go. They're just begging me to get hit. So
let's go. So, and man, you have a great rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Thanks again, Michael. Take care of yourself.
Not a problem. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. We'll see you.